The light through the kitchen window had turned the color of weak tea, amber, fading, hesitant. I had brewed a pot of peppermint hours ago, hoping it would calm the tight twist in my stomach, but the mug sat untouched beside the sink. I checked the clock again. 5:30. Micah had already started pulling couch cushions onto the rug, while Lily had settled under the dining table with a plastic spoon and the remnants of a cereal box. It had been a long afternoon. I leaned against the doorframe and rubbed my lower back. The pressure there was a steady throb now, warning me that I wouldn't have much time tomorrow morning to get myself to the hospital on my own. The twins needed someone tonight, someone now. I had told Mom last week. The surgery's set for Wednesday. Can you come Tuesday night to stay with the kids? She'd sounded concerned at first, even promised to bring Margot's old casserole dish, said she and Dad had blocked off the time. Of course we'll be there, she said, like I was ridiculous for even needing to ask. That was 5 days ago. I pressed the home button on my phone, but the screen stays blank. No missed calls, no texts. I tapped out of habit anyway. My fingers knew the pattern: messages, photos, Instagram. And there it was. A glossy shot of my parents side by side, sunglasses on, the ocean behind them, and cocktails in hand. Sunset vibes, Caribbean cruise, finally retired, posted by Margot. I let the phone fall onto the counter with a dull thud. Lily looked up from under the table and smiled, unaware. The kids didn't deserve the mess I was in. Caleb would have handled all this better. He always knew how to make a plan feel like a solution, how to talk to people so they didn't even realize they were being asked for help. Since he passed, everything had felt like a heavy door I didn't have the strength to push open. I turned off the burner I hadn't used and poured the untouched tea down the sink. The peppermint smell clung to the air anyway, cool and fake cheerful. An alert pinged from my calendar. Pre-op 9:15 a.m. I tapped to dismiss it, hands trembling. This wasn't the kind of surgery you walk into lightly. They'd said minimally invasive. They'd also said internal bleeding risk and possible transfusion. I nodded, not because I was brave, but because there was no one else to nod for me. Micah had managed to wedge himself under the coffee table and was now grunting, trying to reverse. I walked over and tugged him gently by the ankles until he slid free, giggling. I smiled. It felt foreign on my face. Okay, I murmured aloud, though no one was listening. It's going to be okay. But it wasn't. Not tonight. Not with no one to watch them. No backup. No plan B. I had called every friend I trusted. Vacation, family in town, can't miss work. I didn't blame them, but I'd run out of names. I opened the fridge, a few eggs, half a carton of milk, and a leftover container labeled Monday. We hadn't made it to Thursday's chicken. I took out the eggs, cracked them into a bowl, and whisked slowly. Familiar motion, easy rhythm. Caleb used to hum when he did this. I didn't hum, not anymore. Lily came out from under the table, rubbing her eyes. She climbed into her booster chair wordlessly. Micah followed, dragging a plastic bunny by one ear. I scrambled the eggs and cut up the toast into squares. They ate quietly, little mouths chewing in unison. After dinner, I changed their diapers, cleaned up stray crumbs, and read Goodnight Moon 3 times, even though Micah preferred The Snowy Day. Caleb used to switch voices. I couldn't do the voices, not tonight. By 8, the apartment was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock above the microwave. I stood there for a long while, just listening. I should have cried, maybe, or screamed, but I was too tired to feel outraged, the kind of tired that doesn't just sit in your bones but takes root behind your ribs, makes itself at home in the hollow spaces. I walked back to the kitchen, flicked on the overhead light, and reached for the pad of emergency contacts we'd kept on the fridge, more for peace of mind than practicality. My finger paused at a name I hadn't thought of in years. She wasn't a relative, not really a friend, just someone Caleb once mentioned after a church event, before the twins were born. I'd met her once, maybe twice. She had worked with children back then. The number was still there, penciled faintly. I ran my thumb over the digits. Is there anyone else you can call? The nurse had asked earlier. I picked up my phone. My breath caught for a second. Then I whispered, There's one name I remember. I expected someone louder, maybe a clipboard, bright smile, church shoes, not boots with cracked soles, and a scarf that smelled faintly of cedar. It took me longer than I'd admit to open the door, not because I was worried, well, maybe a little, but mostly because I was embarrassed. I haven't brushed my hair since the night before, and the hoodie I'd thrown on over my hospital gown still had Micah's snack crumbs in the pocket. The apartment smelled faintly of antiseptic from the hospital bag and the peppermint I'd spilled earlier. She stood there like she didn't want to take up too much space. Mid-40s, maybe? Hard to tell. There were lines near her eyes, but not the tired kind, more like the kind that comes from squinting into wind and sun. Her cardigan was patched at the elbow, jeans soft from years of washing. She wasn't what I'd imagined when the nurse said, "We have someone who's helped before." She held up a small plastic container with both hands. "Sweet potato muffins," she said almost apologetically. "Still warm." I blinked. "You're Nora?" She gave a short nod. "Nora Bellamy, Carol called me, said you might need someone." I opened the door wider, letting her step in. The twins peeked around the corner from the living room, Lily holding Micah's hand like she'd been told to keep him still. Nora knelt almost immediately, one knee creaking just enough to make her wince. "Hi there," she said gently, voice low like she was talking to nervous birds. "I'm Nora. You must be Lily, and this guy is Micah?" Micah buried his face into Lily's shoulder. Lily, as usual, appraised the situation with a surprising amount of scrutiny for a 2-year-old. I didn't know why I was expecting balloons or some kind of counselor's bag full of tricks. She didn't come with stickers or a schedule, just that little Tupperware, a worn canvas tote slung over one shoulder, and a tired but sincere smile. "I know you don't know me," she said as she stood slowly, "and you have every right to be hesitant. But I've worked with little ones for a long time, mostly kids in transition, loss, change. I don't ask questions, I just stay where I'm needed." I didn't have a response for that, just the dull ache in my abdomen and the rising panic I'd managed to keep suppressed all morning. "I'll be here overnight," she continued, eyes scanning the room quickly, like she was mapping exits and soft spots. "Longer if you need. You don't owe me anything." I motioned to the living room where the kids had retreated. "Do you want to sit with them for a bit? I need to finish a couple things before surgery." "Of course," she said. I watched her take off her shoes at the door without asking. She moved with the kind of care that didn't call attention to itself. She placed the muffins on the kitchen counter, rolled her sleeves up, and joined the twins on the rug, crossing her legs with a little grunt. Out of her tote came a picture book held together with tape at the spine. "This one's about a duck who wants to fly south for winter," she told Lily, "but he's never left his pond before." Lily leaned closer. Micah sat back on his heels, still cautious. I slipped into the bedroom and lay on the bed, trying not to cry. The hospital called an hour later to confirm everything. "Your pre-op starts at 6:45 a.m., the woman said. "Bring any documents and your bag. No food after midnight." I thanked her, though I could barely form words. Later that night, after a silent dinner and the bath routine that felt like moving underwater, I found Nora sitting by the window. The twins had fallen asleep on the floor, curled up in a shared blanket. Her back was against the wall, knees up, book still open in her lap. "I'm not here for money," she said without looking at me. "Just the kids and you." I swallowed, my throat dry. I expected someone different. Nora smiled faintly. "People usually do." I didn't answer, just stepped over the toys on the rug and sat on the arm of the couch. My side throbbed, and I shifted carefully. Micah stirred first, whimpering, then Lily followed. Nora stood up in one slow motion, scooping both into her arms like she'd known them forever. She hummed something low under her breath, maybe a lullaby, maybe nothing at all. She settled in the recliner near the window, rocking slowly, her scarf slipping loose. The scent of cedar drifted faintly across the room. Before my eyes closed, I asked, just above a whisper, why would a stranger show up when my own parents didn't? 27 missed calls. None asked how I was. All wanted the money back. The sunlight had a different texture the morning after surgery, softer maybe, or just slower to settle. I blinked awake to a pale stripe of light slicing across the foot of the bed. The room smelled faintly of lavender and oatmeal. Somewhere beyond the bedroom, I could hear soft humming. Not mechanical, but human. I sat up carefully, the gauze at my side reminding me that my insides were still rearranging themselves. My hand reached instinctively for my phone on the nightstand. 27 missed calls, most from my father, a few from my mother, not one from Margot. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Dad's voice clipped and irritable. "We just got a call from the bank. You can't pull funding like this without a conversation." I skipped to the next. "You're putting us in a terrible position, Marilyn." Another. "Do you even care what this does to your mother's health?" "Not once." "How are you?" "Not once." "Are the kids okay?" I dropped the phone face down on the blanket. My fingers felt cold even in the warm morning light. When I finally rose and shuffled into the living room, Nora was already up, sitting cross-legged on the rug with Lily in her lap and Micah curled against her side. They were coloring. Well, Lily was scribbling intently, and Micah was mostly chewing the edge of a green crayon. Nora looked up and smiled. "You're awake," she said, voice gentle but steady. I nodded. "How long have I been out?" "You came in and out yesterday afternoon. They said the surgery went well. Clean, no complications." I eased into the recliner across from her. "Thanks for staying." "You don't have to thank me." "I do." She looked back down at the coloring page and ran a hand gently over Lily's curls, smoothing them down. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen someone do that without needing something in return. There was a small package on the table, wrapped in reused tissue paper with a note in block letters, "For your girls. Ma." I opened it slowly. Inside was a crocheted blanket, lavender and white. The kind my mother used to make, but this wasn't her work. The loops were looser, the pattern simpler. "You?" I asked Nora. She nodded once, not meeting my eyes. "I find it helps." Before I could say more, there was a knock at the door. Margot stepped in, holding a glass casserole dish and looking like she hadn't slept. Her scarf was slightly off-center, her boots mismatched. "I brought sweet potato casserole," she said, lifting the dish as if in explanation. "You're here," I said, more surprised than greeting. She sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. "They told me it was a routine checkup." "I didn't know." I didn't answer. She fidgeted with the dish's plastic lid. "I should have checked with you directly." Silence stretched between us. Lily crawled toward her cautiously, crayon still in hand. "They said you were being dramatic," Margot said quietly. I believed them. My throat tightened. I wanted to yell or laugh or stand and walk away, but I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I glanced toward Nora, who gently scooped up Micah and whispered, "We'll take a walk around the hall. Give you two a moment." When the door closed behind her, Margot exhaled slowly. "They're never going to come, Margot. Not for the surgery, not for the twins, not for anything that requires staying past cocktail hour." She looked down at her hands. "I really didn't know." "I believe you." We sat there, two women separated by a lifetime of secondhand truths. After a while, Margot leaned forward, eyes on the half-empty tea mug in front of me. "That woman, Nora, she's not what I expected." "She's not what anyone expects," I said. "That's kind of the point." On the windowsill, a small basket I hadn't noticed before sat nestled between a poinsettia and a stack of children's books. Inside were peppermint candies, a pack of tissues, and a handwritten card that read, "From a neighbor who's watching. You're not invisible." "Did you leave this?" I asked. Margot shook her head. "Nope." Nora returned a few minutes later, Micah giggling in her arms, Lily toddling behind. She settled back into her corner without a word. I watched her for a moment. "You've got a gift," I said. She shrugged. "Just practice." Margot tilted her head. "You're not what I expected." Nora looked at her calmly. "Most people aren't." Later, when Margot had left and the apartment had returned to its new rhythm of quiet toys and coloring books, I turned to Nora. "That photo," she said softly, nodding toward the mantel. "The man holding the twins, that's Caleb?" I nodded. Nora's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "He's the one who helped me years ago." "That's him," Nora whispered, fingertips trembling against the frame. He built the first bridge I ever trusted. The air smelled of apples and cinnamon, remnants of a failed attempt at pie from earlier that morning. I hadn't baked since Caleb passed, but something about the way the kitchen light softened through the rain-streaked window made me want to try. I'd burned the crust, of course. The house had held the smoke longer than it held the warmth. Nora was kneeling in front of the fireplace, the twins watching her intently as she folded a small lavender blanket. The stitches were slightly uneven, but the care behind each loop was unmistakable. I stood at the mantel, holding the frame she'd asked to see again. The photograph was simple: Caleb in a flannel shirt, Holden, Lily, and Micah swaddled in blue and yellow. His smile looked tired but proud. It was taken 3 days before the headache started, before the scans, before we had to make the kinds of decisions you only ever want to read about in someone else's story. Nora reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed the edge of the frame. "That's him," she said, voice barely above the hum of the radiator. "He built the first bridge I ever trusted." I waited. Her eyes never left the photo. "I was 17, she said. "Bounced between foster homes. Most didn't last longer than a season. I was angry, closed off. Figured the world didn't want much to do with me, so I returned the favor." She sat back, folding her hands in her lap. "There was a nonprofit," she continued. "Small, underfunded. They helped kids aging out of the system with college applications, job skills, a place to breathe. But no one really noticed me. Not until one day I got an email from the director telling me I had a sponsor, that someone had built a personal site just for me. Photo, bio, quotes I hadn't written but wished I had. Made me look like I mattered. I sat down slowly on the armrest of the couch, the edges of the frame still warm in my hand. "I didn't know it was him at the time," Nora said. "Not until I saw this photo." Her eyes finally met mine. "He was the one. The director told me later, some guy named Caleb had been doing a few websites pro bono. Quietly, never wanted credit, just picked a handful of profiles and gave them a platform." My throat tightened. "He never told me," I said. "He wouldn't have," Nora replied. "He didn't do it for thanks, he just did it." There was a long moment of silence, not the heavy kind, but full in a different way, like something sacred had been placed between us. I looked down at the picture again. He always said the right thing. I didn't always believe it then, but he believed in people. Nora nodded, her expression unreadable. "I kept that site," she added quietly. "Still have the layout on an old flash drive. I used it to apply to a child development program, got my license, paid it forward when I could." Lily came toddling over with a plastic teacup, holding it out to Nora with both hands. Nora smiled and accepted it with all the gravity of a real toast. Micah climbed into my lap and tugged gently at the photo. "Daddy," he said softly, not really asking, just naming. "Yeah," I murmured, wrapping my arms around him. "Daddy." A text buzzed on my phone. I ignored it. Then another, this time from Margot. Dad sent another email, and he copied the entire family. I sighed and reached for the phone. My heart didn't even race anymore. It was strange how numbness arrived, not as a wave, but as a settling dust. "Do you want to read it?" I asked. Nora shook her head. "Only if you do." I opened the message. To our extended family, it began, "Marilyn has unilaterally withdrawn financial support from our household, without consultation or notice, placing us in financial jeopardy. We are concerned for her well-being, but even more concerned about the future of our home." I stopped reading. "He still knows how to twist it," I said. Nora nodded. "They always do, until they don't." I looked up at her. "Because someone finally says no," she added. "They told everyone I left them to starve," I muttered. "Funny, I remember asking them to hold my children." The cold that morning settled in places I didn't know could ache. I watched the fog rise from the yard, softening the outline of the neighbor's old swing set. The twins were still asleep, a rare alignment of naps that felt more like divine intervention than routine. I stood by the stove, letting the scent of maple syrup and warm pancakes thicken the kitchen air. Nora had her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, her eyes steady on the window, like she could read the weather for truth. Margot arrived carrying a cloth tote and a stack of printed emails. She didn't knock, just stepped in and closed the door with the sort of finality that said she was tired of pretending nothing was wrong. They sent this to every cousin, she said, dropping the pages on the table like evidence. Even to Aunt Louise in Florida. You haven't spoken to her since high school. I picked up the top sheet. Dad's words glared back. Marilyn has turned her back on the family. We sacrificed for years to support her, and this is how she repays us. They told everyone I left them to starve, I muttered. Funny, I remember asking them to hold my children. Margot winced. They're selling the story hard. Do people believe it? Some, but Eddie replied to all. I raised an eyebrow. Eddie was Dad's nephew, older than me by 6 years, and not one to sugarcoat anything. She handed me her phone. Eddie's message was blunt. If you can afford cruise tickets, you can afford your own mortgage. I almost laughed. Bless him. Just then, a knock. Not the hesitant kind, measured, solid. I opened the door to find Mr. Amos, the neighbor who had never said more than 2 words to me in passing. He stood in a thick flannel coat, holding a foil-covered pie tin. Pecan, he said gruffly. My wife's old recipe. She's been gone 10 years, but the crust still remembers her hands. I blinked, caught off guard. That's very kind. He nodded, cleared his throat. I see a lot from that porch. Folks make up their minds too fast these days. Before I could reply, he handed me the pie and turned back down the steps. No lingering, no lecture, just presents. I brought it inside, placed it gently on the counter. Crust still remembers her hands, I said aloud, more to myself than anyone. Nora smiled. Sounds like love baked in. We ate slices after lunch. The twins smeared syrup on their cheeks, and for a while everything was sticky and sweet and normal. Later that afternoon, Margot sat on the porch swing while Nora and I folded laundry inside. She had stopped defending them. That, alone, felt like progress. They counted on you to say yes, Nora said, smoothing a onesie. They always knew you would. That was their mistake, I replied, carefully pairing tiny socks. Micah toddled in with a toy truck making engine noises that drowned out my thoughts. Lily followed with a drawing, stick figures with halos. She pointed to the smallest one. Me, she said proudly. Outside, Mr. Amos was sweeping again, his movements slow but deliberate. He paused once, looked toward the window, and gave a nod. Deeper this time, almost like acknowledgement. I stood there for a long time after they left. The house felt different. Not full exactly, but no longer hollow. The silence didn't press against my chest like it used to. On the kitchen counter, I found a folded slip of paper beneath the pie tin. The handwriting was careful, blocky. Keep going. They'll stop talking when the truth walks in the room. We're not here to ask for money, my mother said. We know that ship has sailed. The cafe was the kind of place where time moved slower. Maybe it was the way the door creaked when it opened, or how the ceiling fans turned lazily overhead, stirring nothing in particular. The Red Porch Cafe had red and white checkered tablecloths, cracked sugar jars, and a tip jar near the counter with the words, "Bless your heart," scrawled in Sharpie. Jazz played softly from an old speaker tucked behind the pie display. I chose the corner table near the window, the one under the crooked frame that held a watercolor of Asheville in winter. I arrived early, ordered jasmine tea, and left a couple of bills under the jar without waiting for change. It was habit now. Outside, Mr. Amos walked by with his basset hound. He didn't stop, just tipped his cap. That was enough. 10 minutes later, my parents arrived. They looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe not physically, but in presence. My father's shoulders, once always squared, seemed to slump beneath a light gray jacket that had creases from disuse. My mother wore plain flats, no jewelry, no scarf. Her hair, usually lacquered into stiff waves, hung simply at her shoulders, clipped back with something practical. They didn't speak at first, just stood there like guests, unsure if they were welcome. I didn't rise to greet them, just motioned to the 2 chairs across from me. They sat slowly. You look well, my mother said. I nodded once. We've started volunteering at the community garden, my father added. I haven't touched a shovel in years. That must be humbling, I said. He smiled faintly. It is. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the clink of mugs behind the counter and the slow rise of Moon River from the speakers. "We're not here to ask for money," my mother said. "We know that ship has sailed." My lips twitched, not quite a smile, not yet. She began, folding her napkin carefully. "We wondered if someday you might let us know your children." I stirred my tea, the spoon clinking gently against porcelain. "They're not concepts," I said. "Not extensions of your story, they're real." They laugh when the dishwasher hums, and Lily insists on sleeping with 2 blankets even when it's hot. Micah calls Nora Bear for no reason at all. They nodded. They didn't protest. They didn't defend. I watched them, watched the effort it took not to interrupt me. "I'm their mother," I said, "and I won't let anyone close who doesn't respect that." My father wiped his glasses with the cloth he pulled from his pocket. My mother folded her hands. "We understand," she said. I stood, smoothing my coat. I left another tip beneath the sugar jar, same spot as always, and walked out without a promise to call, without a goodbye kiss, but not angry, just finished. As I turned onto the cobblestone path toward home, I saw them. Nora was waiting near the corner, holding Lily on her hip. Micah stood beside her, clutching a paper bag of crackers. Margot was there too, hands deep in her coat pockets, nodding at something Nora said. Mr. Amos leaned against the lamppost, his dog sniffing at the grass. He looked up as I approached and spoke without preamble. "Told you she's stronger than she looks." To Margot, I smiled. Some moments stay with you, not because they were loud or grand, but because someone simply showed up when it mattered most. In a season when I felt abandoned, it was the quiet presence of a stranger that carried us through. Kindness, when freely given, has a way of finding its way home, and often the people we least expect are the ones who teach us what family can truly mean. So if you're watching the window today, wondering if anyone will come, remember, sometimes the strongest bridges are built by hands you almost overlooked.